Eric Eshelman opened his door at 7 a.m. to find his CEO, Susan Davis, standing on his porch in a red sweater with tears in her eyes. She said her divorce had left her with no one to turn to, and he believed her because he'd never seen the Ice Queen look so broken. He led her inside, made her tea, and watched her stare at the photo of his 8-year-old adopted daughter on the mantel like she'd seen a ghost. What Eric didn't know was that Susan hadn't come to his door by accident. She'd been searching for that little girl for 9 years, ever since the day she'd been forced to give her up, and she finally found her in a company picnic photo posted on social media. The red sweater, the tears, the trembling hands. It was all real, but the loneliness story was only half the truth. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. Susan Davis sat on Eric's worn leather couch and explained that her divorce from Richard had been finalized the day before. She said she'd married him because he was safe and successful, but that she'd never actually loved him. Their marriage had been more like a business arrangement than a real relationship. After 20 years of building quantum dynamics into a billion-dollar tech company, she'd realized she had no real friends, no real family, and no one who cared about her as a person rather than as a CEO. Eric listened and felt sorry for her. He'd worked at Quantum Dynamics for 3 years and had always thought of Susan as untouchable, the Ice Queen who'd fired half the executive team without blinking. But now she was sitting in his modest living room, her carefully styled hair messy and her expensive clothes wrinkled, looking like any other person who'd just lost everything. Susan told Eric he was the only person at the company who'd ever treated her like a human being. Everyone else saw her title and her power, but Eric had always been kind to her even when she didn't deserve it. She said she'd woken up at 4 a.m. that morning in her empty mansion and realized she couldn't stand another day of being alone. So she'd driven to his house because she needed to be around someone who might actually care if she disappeared. Eric told her he was glad she'd come. He said she didn't have to be alone. That's when they heard footsteps upstairs. Lily was waking up. Susan's whole body went tense. Eric noticed but didn't understand why. He explained that Lily was his 8-year-old daughter and that he'd adopted her 5 years ago when she was 3. He told Susan that Lily had been abandoned at a hospital as a newborn and had spent 3 years in foster care before he brought her home. Susan asked questions about the adoption, careful questions that seemed casual but weren't. She asked about Lily's age, her birthday, whether Eric knew anything about her biological parents. Eric explained that the state had tried to find Lily's birth mother but had never succeeded. There had been no note, no information, nothing. When Lily came downstairs in her pajamas, Susan stared at her like she was looking at a miracle. Eric introduced them, and Lily asked if Susan was staying for breakfast. Susan said yes. Over the next 3 weeks, Susan became a regular presence in their lives. She'd stop by in the mornings before work for coffee, or she'd bring takeout for dinner and eat with them at Eric's small kitchen table. She helped Lily with her homework, played board games with her, and laughed at her jokes. Eric had never seen this side of Susan, the warm, maternal side that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or stock prices. Eric started falling in love with her. It was complicated because she was his boss and because he'd spent the last 5 years focused entirely on being a good father, but he couldn't help it. Susan was different when she was with them. She was real, but there were strange moments too. Susan would watch Lily with an intensity that seemed excessive, like she was trying to memorize every detail. She asked a lot of questions about Lily's early childhood, her health, her habits. She seemed particularly interested in the crescent-shaped birthmark on Lily's left shoulder and asked Eric if he knew whether it was something she'd been born with or something that had developed later. Eric told himself he was being paranoid. Susan had said she'd always wanted children, but had sacrificed that dream for her career. Of course she'd be fascinated by Lily. Of course she'd ask questions. It didn't mean anything suspicious. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Susan and Eric sat together on the couch with glasses of wine. Susan was quiet, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass over and over. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Always," Eric said. "I had a daughter once." Susan's voice was barely above a whisper. 9 years ago, I was 28, just starting to build quantum dynamics. I got pregnant by someone I'd been dating casually. Someone who made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with the child. Eric felt his chest tighten. He didn't say anything. Susan continued. I was terrified. I just got my first major investment, and I knew that if word got out that I was a single mother, the investors would pull their funding. This was before #MeToo, before people pretended to care about work-life balance. Women in tech were already fighting impossible battles. A woman with a baby? That was career suicide. What did you do? Eric asked, though he thought he already knew. I gave her up. Susan's voice broke. I had her in a private clinic, held her for maybe 10 minutes, and then I left her at a hospital with nothing. No note, no information, nothing that could trace back to me. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that she'd have a better life with someone who could actually be a parent. But I've thought about her every single day since then. Eric's mind was racing. 9 years ago, abandoned at a hospital. No information. Susan, he said slowly, are you saying... I saw Lily's birthmark in a photo from the company picnic last month, Susan interrupted. That crescent shape on her left shoulder. I remembered it. I'd stared at it while I held her in that clinic, trying to memorize every detail before I had to let her go. When I saw it in the photo, I knew. The room seemed to spin. Eric stood up, his wine glass falling to the floor. Red liquid spread across the hardwood like blood. You're telling me that Lily is your biological daughter, Eric said, and you've known this for a month. You've been coming to my house, spending time with her, getting close to both of us, and you didn't tell me. I didn't know how, Susan said. She was crying now, tears running down her face. I didn't come here planning to fall in love with you. I just wanted to see her, to know that she was okay. But then I got to know you, and I got to know her, and everything became so complicated. Get out, Eric said. Eric, please. Get out of my house. His voice was shaking. You lied to me. You used me. Everything about the divorce, about being lonely, about needing a friend. It was all just a way to get close to Lily. That's not true. Susan stood up, reaching for him. The divorce was real. The loneliness was real. My feelings for you are real. Yes, I came here because of Lily, but I stayed because of you. I don't believe you. Eric walked to the door and opened it. Leave. Now. And don't come back. Susan left. Eric locked the door behind her and stood there, his whole body shaking. Upstairs, he could hear Lily's soft breathing. She was safe, asleep, unaware that her entire world had just shifted. Eric had spent 5 years protecting her. He'd fought through the adoption process, dealt with her nightmares, held her when she cried, promised her over and over that he would never leave her. And now the woman who'd abandoned her as a baby had come back, had gotten into their lives, had made Eric care about her. He felt sick. He felt betrayed. And underneath it all, he felt terrified that Susan might try to take Lily away from him. The next morning at work, Eric avoided Susan completely. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, ate lunch at his desk, and left early to pick up Lily from school. Susan sent him emails that he deleted without reading. She called his office phone, and he let it go to voicemail. For 3 days, Eric pretended everything was fine. He made Lily pancakes for breakfast, helped her with her math homework, read her bedtime stories. He didn't tell her about Susan's revelation because he didn't know what to say. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the nice woman who'd been coming to dinner was actually her birth mother? On Thursday afternoon, Eric was in a meeting with his development team when Susan walked in. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy bun. The Ice Queen was back, all business. Eric, I need to speak with you, she said. Privately. Eric wanted to refuse, but everyone in the room was watching. He followed Susan to her office, his jaw tight. She closed the door and turned to face him. Julian Thorne is coming after your department. Julian Thorne was a board member who'd been trying to push Susan out of the CEO position for the last year. He was old money, a venture capitalist who thought tech companies should be run by men. He'd been vocal about his belief that Susan was too emotional, too aggressive, too female to lead quantum dynamics effectively. What do you mean? coming after my department? Eric asked. He's claiming that your team's last 3 projects have gone over budget and underdelivered. He's going to propose cutting your entire division and outsourcing the work to a contractor he has connections with. Susan's voice was hard and professional, but Eric could see the worry in her eyes. He's doing this to hurt me, Eric. He knows you're important to me. He knows that if he can force me to fire you, it'll make me look weak. You told him about us? Eric's voice rose. About Lily? No. God, no. But he's not stupid. He's had people watching me. He knows I've been going to your house. Eric laughed bitterly. So now my job is at risk because you couldn't stay away. I'm not going to let him do this, Susan said. I'll fight him. I have the votes to block his proposal. I don't need you to fight for me. Eric moved toward the door. I don't need anything from you. Susan grabbed his arm. Eric, please. I know you're angry. I know I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I'm not the enemy here. Julian is. And if we don't work together, he's going to destroy both of us. Eric pulled his arm free. You already destroyed this. You lied to me for weeks. You came into my home, played with my daughter, made me think you care about me, and it was all based on a lie. I do care about you. Susan's voice cracked. Everything I told you is true. I did feel alone. I did need someone. Yes, I came to your house because of Lily, but I fell in love with you for real. That wasn't part of any plan. I don't believe you, Eric said again. But this time his voice was less certain. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Eric spent Thursday night researching Julian Thorne and trying to figure out what he was really after. The budget overruns Thorne was complaining about were minor, normal for the kind of innovative work Eric's team was doing. The missed deadlines were mostly because Susan had changed the project scope halfway through, asking for additional features that required more time. This wasn't about Eric's performance. This was about finding a weakness in Susan's armor. At 3 p.m. on Friday, Eric sat in the boardroom and listened to Julian Thorne present his case. Thorne was in his 60s, silver-haired and expensive-suited, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He had charts and graphs showing Eric's department's cost versus output. He had emails from clients complaining about delays. He had a whole presentation designed to make Eric look incompetent. Susan defended Eric with ferocity that surprised everyone in the room. She pulled up her own data showing that Eric's team had the highest innovation rate in company. She pointed out that the client complaints Thorne had mentioned were from one difficult client who'd changed their requirements 12 times. She reminded the board that Eric's last major project had been featured in TechCrunch and had led to a 20% increase in their stock price. It worked. The board voted down Thorne's proposal. Eric's department was safe. But as people filed out of the boardroom, Thorne stopped next to Susan's chair. Eric was close enough to hear him whisper, "This isn't over. I know about your little secret. Susan, and when I'm ready, I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." Susan's face went white. That evening, Eric found Susan waiting by his car in the parking garage. She looked smaller somehow, less powerful, like the fight had drained something out of her. "Thank you," Eric said stiffly, "for defending me in there. I meant what I said. Your work is excellent." Susan hesitated. "Eric, can we talk? Really talk?" "I don't think." "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Eric unlocked his car, and they sat inside with the engine off. The parking garage was mostly empty, their voices echoing off concrete walls. Susan spoke first. "Julian knows about Lily. I don't know how, but he knows. That's what he meant about my secret." Eric felt cold. "How is that possible? You said you didn't tell anyone." "I didn't, but I've been doing research, trying to find records from when I gave birth. I used a private investigator, someone I thought I could trust. Julian must have gotten to them somehow." Susan's hands were shaking. "He's going to use this to destroy me. He'll leak it to press, make it into a scandal. CEO abandons her baby and then stalks the adoptive father. It doesn't matter that I gave her up legally or that I've been trying to respect your boundaries. He'll twist it into something ugly. What do you want from me?" Eric asked. "I don't know." Susan looked at him with desperate eyes. "I don't want to lose my company. But I also don't want to lose you. Or Lily. And I know I don't have any right to either of you, but I can't help how I feel. Eric closed his eyes. He'd spent 3 days being angry, building walls, telling himself that Susan was manipulative and selfish and not to be trusted. But sitting here in his car, listening to her voice break, he couldn't hold on to that anger completely, because he remembered the way she'd laughed at Lily's jokes, the way she'd listened to his stories about work, the way she'd looked at him like he mattered. I need to know something, Eric said. If Lily wasn't my daughter, if she was just some random kid, would you still have feelings for me? Susan didn't hesitate. Yes, Eric, you're the first person in 20 years who's made me feel like I could be something other than a CEO. You're kind and funny and patient, and you built this beautiful life with your daughter. I admire you. I respect you. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Lily brought me to your door, but you're the reason I kept coming back. I want to believe that, Eric said quietly. Then believe it, please. Susan reached for his hand. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I should have told you the truth from the start, but I'm telling you now, and I'm asking you to let me prove that my feelings are real. Eric looked down at their joined hands. He thought about Lily asking where Susan had been, why she hadn't come to dinner all week. He thought about how happy they'd been, the three of them, before everything got complicated. If we do this, Eric said, we do it the right way. No more secrets. No more lies. And Lily comes first. Always. Always, Susan agreed. And we need to deal with Julian Thorne before he ruins both our lives. Susan nodded. I have an idea about that, but you're not going to like it. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My father said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to my channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. Susan's plan was simple and terrible. She wanted to go public with the story herself before Julian could leak it. She'd hold a press conference, admit that Lily was her biological daughter, and explain that she'd given her up for adoption years ago before she'd built quantum dynamics. She'd frame it as a story of redemption, a woman who'd made a hard choice and was now trying to make amends. Eric hated the idea. He didn't want Lily's private life spread across tech blogs and news sites. He didn't want photographers camped outside their house or reporters calling Lily school. He'd spent 5 years trying to give her a normal, stable childhood, and this would destroy that. But Susan pointed out that Julian was going to leak the story anyway. At least if they controlled the narrative, they could try to minimize the damage. They spent the weekend preparing. Susan hired a crisis management firm and a lawyer. Eric talked to Lily's school and warned them that there might be media attention. And on Saturday night, sitting at the kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed, Eric and Susan decided they needed to tell Lily the truth before anyone else did. Sunday morning, Eric made pancakes and tried to act normal. Lily chattered about a sleepover she wanted to have with her friend Emma, and Eric said they'd talk about it later. After breakfast, he asked Lily to sit with him and Susan in the living room because they had something important to tell her. Lily looked worried. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. Eric took a deep breath. Do you remember how I told you that your birth mother wasn't able to take care of you when you were born, so she gave you up for adoption? Lily nodded slowly. Well, Susan is your birth mother. There was a long silence. Lily looked from Eric to Susan and back again, her 8-year-old mind trying to process this information. You're my real mom? She asked Susan. Susan's eyes filled with tears. I'm your biological mother. Yes. But Eric is your real parent. He's the one who's taken care of you and loved you and been there for you every single day. I gave you up when you were a baby because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought you'd have a better life with someone else. Why did you come to our house? Lily asked. Her voice was small and confused. Eric answered that one. Susan saw your picture at the company picnic and recognized your birthmark. She wanted to meet you and make sure you were okay. And then she got to know us and things got complicated. Are you going to take me away? Lily's lip was trembling now. No. Susan moved to kneel in front of Lily's chair. No, sweetheart. Never. Eric is your dad. This is your home. I'm not here to take you away from anything. I'm just hoping that maybe, if you want, I could be part of your life too. Not as a replacement for anything, but just as someone who cares about you very much. Lily started crying. Eric pulled her into his lap and held her while she sobbed. Susan sat on the floor with tears running down her face, and Eric reached out with one hand to touch her shoulder. It's okay, he told Lily. Everything's going to be okay. I promise. He wasn't sure if that was true, but he needed to believe it. On Monday morning, Susan's lawyer sent a letter to Julian Thorne warning him that if he leaked any private information about Susan or Eric's family, they would pursue legal action. It was a bluff. They didn't have much legal ground to stand on, but they hoped it would make him think twice. It didn't work. Tuesday afternoon, Eric got a call from Susan's assistant saying there was an emergency board meeting. When Eric arrived at the office, Susan was already in the boardroom with Julian and 3 other board members. Julian had documents spread across the conference table. DNA record, hospital files, emails from Susan's private investigator. He'd gotten everything. You used company resources to track down a child you abandoned, Julian said to Susan. His voice was calm and measured, which made the accusation even worse. You paid an investigator with company funds. You've been conducting a personal relationship with an employee, which is a clear violation of our ethics code, and you've been lying to this board for months about your activities. Susan's face was ice. I paid for the investigator with my personal funds, not company money, and my relationship with Eric has nothing to do with my job performance. It has everything to do with your judgment, Julian countered. You're emotionally compromised. You're making decisions based on personal feelings rather than what's best for the company. The board has a right to know that their CEO is unstable. I am not unstable, Susan said coldly. Then explain to me why you abandoned a child 9 years ago to build this company, and now you're willing to risk everything you built for that same child. That's not rational behavior. That's guilt and sentiment clouding your judgment. Julian turned to the other board members. I move that we invoke the moral turpitude clause in Susan's contract and remove her as CEO effective immediately. Eric stood up. You can't do this. Susan is the best CEO this company has ever had. Her personal life has nothing to do with her ability to lead. Julian smiled at him. It wasn't a nice smile. And you're exactly the problem, Mr. Eshelman. You've been manipulated by a woman who saw your daughter as an opportunity to resolve her own guilt. Susan Davis doesn't care about you. She cares about fixing her past mistakes, and you and your daughter are just tools for her redemption. Eric looked at Susan. She was staring at the table, her hands clenched into fists. That's not true, Eric said quietly. Susan made mistakes, yes, but she's also been honest with me about why she came into my life. And whatever her original motivations were, I believe that her feelings for me and for Lily are real. Then you're a fool, Julian said. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. Julian presented his evidence and his arguments. Susan defended herself with facts and figures showing her excellent performance as CEO. Eric testified about their relationship and how it had developed. Other board members asked questions, debated, argued. In the end, the vote was split. 3 board members wanted Susan gone. 3 wanted her to stay, and 2 were undecided. Julian called for a recess until the next day, giving the undecided members time to think. Susan left the boardroom without speaking to anyone. Eric found her in her office 20 minutes later, staring out the window at the city below. We're going to lose, Susan said. Even if those 2 undecided votes go our way, Julian will just keep attacking. He'll leak the story to the press. He'll make our lives hell. And eventually, I'll have to resign anyway. So what do we do? Eric asked. Susan turned to look at him. I think I need to quit. No, absolutely not. That's what Julian wants. I know, but if I quit now, on my own terms, I can control the narrative. I can resign for personal reasons, transfer my shares to a trust for Lily's future, and walk away before this becomes a media circus. Susan's voice was steady. Julian wins the battle, but he doesn't get the satisfaction of destroying me. And more importantly, You and Lily don't get dragged through the mud. Eric shook his head. You worked 20 years to build this company. I'm not going to let you throw it away because of me. You're not throwing it away. I am. And I'm doing it because I love you. Susan smiled sadly. I told you that I gave up everything for this company once before. I gave up my daughter, my chance at a normal life, everything. And where did it get me? A corner office in a lonely mansion. I'm not making that mistake again. Susan, I've already decided, Eric. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into that boardroom and resign before Julian can say a word. I'm going to take away his leverage, protect my reputation enough that I can still work in this industry if I want to, and I'm going to start building a life that actually matters. She took his hands. A life with you and Lily, if you'll have me. Eric pulled her close. She felt small in his arms, vulnerable in a way that the Ice Queen had never been. Of course we'll have you, he whispered into her ear. Wednesday morning. Susan arrived at the office early. She was wearing a gray suit and her hair was perfect, and she looked every inch the powerful CEO she'd been for 20 years. But Eric could see the fear in her eyes when she looked at him in the hallway outside the boardroom. Are you sure about this? He asked. Yes, Susan said. For the first time in a very long time, I'm absolutely sure about something. The board meeting started at 9. Julian Thorne was already seated, looking smug and confident. The other board members filed in, took their seats, waited for the fireworks. Susan stood at the head of the table. Before we continue yesterday's discussion, I have an announcement to make. Effective immediately, I'm resigning as CEO of Quantum Dynamics. The room went silent. Julian's smile faltered. I've spent 20 years building this company, Susan continued, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've accomplished. But I've reached a point in my life where I need to focus on what really matters, my family. I'm transferring my shares to a trust that will benefit my daughter's future, and I'll be stepping down from the board as well. One of the board members spoke up. Susan, if this is about Julian's accusations, we can work through this. You don't have to resign. Thank you, but I've made my decision. This isn't about accusations or scandals or board politics. This is about me choosing to be the person I should have been 9 years ago. Susan looked directly at Julian. You can't destroy someone who's already decided to walk away. She signed the resignation papers right there at the conference table, handed them to the company's legal counsel, and walked out of the boardroom with her head high. Eric followed her out into the hallway. What now? He asked. Susan smiled. It was the first real, genuine smile he'd seen from her in days. Now we go pick up Lily from school and take her to the park. And then we figure out what our life looks like when I'm not spending 80 hours a week in the office. They did exactly that. Eric took the rest of the day off work, his first personal day in 3 years. Susan drove them to Lily's school, and when Lily came out and saw both of them waiting, her face lit up. Why are you both here? She asked. Because we wanted to spend the afternoon with you, Susan said. If that's okay. Lily thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Okay. They went to the park near Eric's house. It was a beautiful April day, warm and sunny with a light breeze. Lily ran to the swings and demanded that Eric push her super high, which he did while Susan watched from a bench nearby. After a while, Lily got tired of the swings and came to sit between Eric and Susan on the bench. The three of them sat there in comfortable silence, watching other kids play. Are you going to live with us now? Lily asked Susan. Susan glanced at Eric. They hadn't discussed that part yet. I don't know, Susan said honestly. That's something your dad and I need to talk about. Would you want me to live with you? Lily considered this seriously. I think so, but you'd have to sleep in the guest room because my dad's bed is too small for 2 people. Eric laughed. We'll figure out the details, sweetheart. And you have to learn to make pancakes, Lily added. Dad's pancakes are the best, but if you're going to be a mom, you should know how to make them too. Susan's eyes welled up. I'd love to learn how to make pancakes. Over the next few weeks, their new life began to take shape. Susan sold her mansion and bought a house 3 blocks from Eric's, close enough to be part of their daily lives, but separate enough that they could take things slow. She started consulting for tech startups, working from home and setting her own hours. And every morning, she'd walk to Eric's house for breakfast. The story did leak to the press eventually. A small tech blog ran an article about Susan Davis's sudden resignation and the rumors of a secret daughter. But by then, the scandal had lost most of its punch. Susan had already left, the company had moved on, and Eric's lawyer sent a stern letter about privacy rights that made most publications back off. Lily adjusted better than Eric had expected. She started calling Susan by her first name rather than Mom, which seemed to be her way of keeping things clear in her head. Eric was Dad. Susan was Susan. And that was okay. 3 months after Susan's resignation, Eric and Susan had dinner together after Lily went to bed. They'd been dating officially for 6 weeks, taking things carefully and slowly. "I have a question," Susan said. They were sitting on Eric's couch with wine glasses, which had become their routine. "Okay," Eric said. "Do you think you could ever forgive me completely? For lying at the beginning? For not telling you the truth right away?" Eric thought about it. "I think I already have. I was angry for a long time, and I'm not saying I trust you completely yet. But I understand why you did what you did, and I can see that you're trying to be better." "I am trying," Susan said quietly. "Every day, I'm trying to be the person you and Lily deserve." "You're doing great," Eric told her. And he meant it. 6 months later, Susan proposed. Not marriage, that felt too fast, but a real commitment. She asked Eric if she could move into his house, into his life completely. She asked if they could try to build a real family together. Eric said yes. A year after Susan first knocked on Eric's door at 7 a.m. in a red sweater, the three of them took a vacation together. They went to the beach, and Eric took a photo of Susan and Lily building a sandcastle, their heads bent close together as they worked. Lily's birthmark was visible on her shoulder, that crescent shape that had started everything. Eric looked at the photo later and thought about how much their lives had changed. A year ago, he'd been a single father focused only on protecting his daughter from the world. Now he had a partner, someone who loved Lily as much as he did, and who was working hard to prove she deserved to be part of their lives. It wasn't perfect. They still had hard conversations about Susan's past, about what they'd tell Lily as she got older, about how to handle the media attention that occasionally flared up, but they were building something real, something that mattered more than corner offices or stock prices. They were building a family. This story teaches us that redemption is possible even after our greatest mistakes, but it requires radical honesty and sacrifice. Susan's journey shows that success built on abandoning our values leaves us empty, while authenticity, no matter how painful, creates real connection. Eric demonstrates that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to believe in someone's capacity to change. The story also reminds us that family isn't just about biology. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who chooses love even when it's complicated. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what we've built to protect what truly matters. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you would like part 2 of Eric, Susan, and Lily's story. What challenges will they face as Susan adjusts to being a full-time mother? How will Lily navigate having 2 parents after years of just having Eric? Will Julia and Thorne try one last scheme to destroy their happiness? And what happens when Lily gets older and wants to know every detail about why Susan gave her up? Let me know if you want to hear more.